It's particularly exciting for me to be able to introduce as our first speaker, our keynoter, Tim Persons. Now, Tim isn't a standards guy per se, so inviting him to this Standards Fest was and is a bit risky. But Tim, as chief scientist at the U.S. Government Accounting Office, the GAO, and as the managing director for its science, technology, and digital team, where he focused on providing assurance for oversight mechanisms in critical areas to help build trust in our institutions, was deeply familiar with the standards-related problems of the financial regulators and supervisors. How do you build trust when the raw material, data, isn't trusted or usable? How do you build and deploy sophisticated analytics when data is not standardized with clear semantics and definitions? Tim also brings deep data and analytics insights from his time in key posts in the intelligence community. He's received GAO's highest awards for his proven track record of leadership in innovation, strategy, and results-oriented execution in digital transformation and services, such as AI, ML, data analytics, cybersecurity, and across myriad science and technology issues. Today, Tim is a partner with PwC, where he leads the development of innovative assurance solutions for its clients in AI, data, algorithms, and other digital transformations to best help them build and maintain trust with their customers and stakeholders. So Tim, please unmute, share your slides, and talk to us. Friends, here is Tim Persons.
Great. Thank you, David, for that kind introduction. Thanks to the Standards Development Organization. I believe you all are doing such important work, often or almost always unrecognized. I wanted to pause and thank you, everyone, for the critically important work of this. Standards is not something that a lot of people fully understand or understand the need why. I hope that in this talk today, in one sense, I know I'm preaching to the choir, as it were, but I do want to just tell you what a fan I am from a practitioner in the field in trying to do big things, especially at a time like this where we've just seen the powerful advent of generative AI in all of our lives. So let me share my screen. I'm going to go through just a few slides to tell the story of how I'm seeing things. And then have time, David, to ask questions or folks from the audience at the end. So let me share my screen. So I really do want to think about or say right at the top, this is really about data, financial data and standards for that data, really fueling a revolution in financial management. But like one of the things I like to do is start from the top and just say, look, we live in a world where we have challenges that are exponential in nature, right? Think about climate change, or think about cybersecurity, global pandemics, and certainly financial market disruptions and volatility, as we're seeing right now, rapid banking collapses. So we are facing things that we have, I think, routinely hit a tipping point, as if we were standing up in the canoe. And once you hit that point, it's all the way over into the water. There's no going halfway and being able to recover kind of thing. And so this is what's shocking us. And of course, part of it is that technology is part of that, or has driven part of that. And so I think that we're seeing a generalized pattern where our problems are exponential in nature, and oftentimes the way we think or the way we are able to respond is essentially linear. And so that just leads to the size of the disruption, how far up the exponential we are on a given issue, subtracting from what we're actually able to do about it. And sometimes this disruption can be quite large. So that sounds like the bad news and the grim news. But I do think that at the same time, especially when you talk about digital technology and why standards making and the use of standardized data is so important, is that all of these digital technologies, and this is just a small sample, are critical to the future of financial management. One of the things, for example, I was working at GAO, we were putting together was data immersive oversight dashboards. So one of the exponentials, I would say, that GAO has to face is, I believe that were they able to do it, which currently they are not, and no one is able to do this, but were they able to audit do a financial audit of Uncle Sam's entire checkbook and bank account and so on? We're talking about billions of records, trillions of dollars. And it's so complicated that we ultimately are going to have to use big data kind of solutions to deliver dashboards. And GAO is the only one that can audit Treasury in this regard. So it's not like my firm currently, PwC or KPMG or any of the big four could possibly do it. But it does require, and we're suffering from, when I was at GAO, and I'm sure they still are, suffering from the lack of standardization in that regard. So again, very important. Of course, there's, in addition to generative AI, another flavor of Gen AI is adversarial machine learning, where this is the iron sharpening iron in the digital space to try and create things. A lot of this technology, by the way, is behind the disinformation and misinformation campaigns and deep fakes. So we have technologies that are both dangerous and powerful to help solve our problems. RPA in the middle here is something that the robotic process automation has been proliferating, I think happily so. Anything that could be coded in and deterministically laid out up front through a more complicated system, but still it's what I'll call black and white computing. It's 2 + 2 in the Excel spreadsheet equals 4. Then RPA can do that. And there's a lot of, I think, joy in the financial management community when you do this right, not to eliminate labor, but to allow labor to focus on the more complicated things that I have no doubt you as financial managers and standard setters have to face. And I think that's a general story, by the way, for AI overall. And then there's always the issue of having accountable machine learning or AI based on human feedback. And I think oftentimes our minds jump right to the fully autonomous system, and we start getting into some of the big fear narratives about AI. The two biggest ones being the job apocalypse, right? We're all going to be out of work, which is not true. Or the robot apocalypse, where the robots are going to come to themselves, and it's like the Terminator movie plot. And so that is not true either. Machines are still going to need us. So we can't not talk about ChatGPT because it's so big. This is a technology that it picked up 1 million users in 5 days. Okay, so that was that's just the benchmark, and then it kept going up that exponential and hit 100 million users in 60 days. So global users, 100 million. That's the size of the Super Bowl audience. And it was the fastest moving app ever to get there. Netflix, for example, and others were taking 2.5, 3.5 years to reach 100 million users, just to give you a sense of how disruptive it is. So what is ChatGPT? I think it's important because this is the story I'm telling about all data, and financial would be included, because in my work, I work with, many of you know Wes Bricker. He's our vice chair of trust at PwC, and he's a leader in XBRL, another very important issue. And I know we have a speaker later on talking about that. But we really are talking about what happens when you have standardized data and you can do things with it with this generative AI on text. And I would say if you're talking about symbolic information, then financial could be there. If you're talking about doing more complicated financial audits or financial management. And so natural language processing there, it's been around, but the advent of the Gen AI is important. And so this is a big revolution, but let's unpack what it is. So, because a lot of us are excited, as we should be, about GPT, but we need to just make sure that we unpack it so that I can decompose it and say, here's what it is for anyone who is perhaps overly excited about it or not as excited about it, whatever the case may be. Chat is just the type of the app. So when you pull that piece out, it's a chat bot. You put text into a window and you get text back that's amalgamated. I think generative, you have to put an asterisk on because it's really amalgamating content that has already been created. And so that's one of the things that's important. And if we're talking about working on data that's been created, then that's enter the very important, I would say critical world of standards. So, but it's not just about text. You can put text in and it'll get images out. So the G is generative. So it has this ability to produce or create. Again, I would say more amalgamation in this case. But the creation, so to speak, in here is if I put in text and I ask the machine to give me a red Yorkie super dog who's flying over Metropolis into the camera at Mach 2. And so this is where the machine has to know what a super dog would be, like taking Superman concepts and understanding what a Yorkie is, a type of dog, the color, the fact that it's flying into the camera, etc. All of this is a fantastic advent in machine learning to amalgamate those concepts and then put them into an image. So it works for images, it works for text, it works for all kinds of anything to anything data with respect to what it's doing now. And the P in ChatGPT is pre-trained. It just means here's what you have fed into the algorithm so that when you're typing something in, the algorithm is going to amalgamate on what it has in its neural network, which is just the collection. Think of it like a computer's version of our brain cells and how we process information. The computer is processing those things to try and generate the sentences and so on. But you could have ingest, and they have entirety of Wikipedia, which often, that's not 100% accurate all the time. I think studies have showed it's like 80% accurate on things. But the point is that Wikipedia is often pretty much close to truth in terms of its first impressions, but you don't go to it as an authoritative dissertation on some given topic. But it's quick, it works, and you can train an algorithm to do that. So that's important because as I was talking to David before, this is really about the data nutrition is what I call it, and why it's so important to have nutritious data going into what's being put here versus things that are junk. As an extreme example, but just to paint the picture, if we were to ingest or have the system ingest the text of Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf, right, we would not be or should not be surprised if we ask it some questions here and there and anti-Semitism comes out, right? So the point is that what we feed it matters. We don't want garbage and junk like Mein Kampf. We want things that are true, things that are good, and it all needs to be standardized. All right, so here's the real kicker about things is the T. The T just stands for transformer, okay? Now, this is just a textual example, so thinking like a computer scientist. And I want you to, in your mind, complete this sentence where it says, quote, I arrived at the bank after crossing the blank. Okay, so just to take a moment, what comes up in your mind? So many of you, I have no doubt, probably said some variant of street or road. Okay, so it means that I arrived at the bank, as in this local bank, after crossing the road or the street and so on, which has a very different meaning than if I said if I'm crossing the river, right? So the bank as a building versus a bank as a geographical feature, boundary line on a river are very different. And so how a computer probabilistically, when facing this sentence, if it doesn't have contextual information around it, the machine, like a ChatGPT, if it were a very simple version, would have to coin flip between these two things, right? Because it would see sentences that it could construct that made sense with river or road. And so probabilistically, you'd have a problem. So you need to tell it more information on how to do things. And so enter the transformer, the T, it's the encoder or decoder algorithm. And there's a picture that comes from Google, which it was actually 2017. Google created the transformer, and their application is something most of us likely have on our phones or have used or done on the web, which is their Google Translate. How do I translate language A into language B? So I encode in English, right? And then I decode in something Arabic or German or French or something like that. So here's what it looks like with respect to the algorithm. It's just going to start over in an encoding moment, and it's going to start with I arrived at the, and the encoding is what's unique about the transformer is that the algorithm is cross-checking or correlating each word with itself and generating these probabilistic neural network nodes at the encoder phase, this upper three rows. And then down below, it's going to create a decoding sequence. In this case, the task is translating from English, I arrived at the, and put it into French, which is je suis arrivé. So with apologies to any French scholars, but that's the gist of how it works whenever you use translate. So when you talk about being generative, if you multiply this times the size of text cross correlation and things with something like Wikipedia or the Library of Congress, that's what allows us to be able to disambiguate probabilistically, not deterministically, but probabilistically what is going on and why it's so believable. So look at a second example real quick, and then we'll be done with the ChatGPT overview. But you see this sentence here is identical except for the last word, right? So the animal didn't cross the street because it was too tired or because it was too wide. Now, the key challenge for a machine is to understand the word it. So this is a classic thing where in the first case, the word it refers to the animal, because you would say animal is what correlates to something that's tired. Whereas in the second sentence, the word it would correlate to street because you're talking about something that's too wide. And so how a machine understands that, we all get that because of the way humans think and are educated and so on, but the machine has to work in the probability world. And so this is what the transformer does. It breaks down the sentence, it pulls out the word it, and then it creates a probability distribution, and then comes up with the darker blue in the first case means it's saying with higher probability, animal is the one that correlates to it, is the word in the sentence, versus in the second case, street does. So you see how this is really this probabilistic correlation issue. And that's why, again, what you're feeding into the machine, both in the encoder and allowing it to decode into a different language or to understand semantic context and so on, is so important. And so the key issue is explainability in our AI. Being AI now, which uses ChatGPT, is now doing what it should do, is indexing and referencing, saying, where did you get that from? And you have sourcing and so on. That's very powerful when you think about having massive amounts of data like Microsoft does, or Google certainly does, and being able to put it into their large language model and then come out with something that ultimately is explainable. So we have to move from where we have been today, which is we're still at times not understanding, why did you do that? Why not something else? What makes you succeed? What makes you fail? When can I trust you? This trust is a huge word, is why I'm really at PwC, to try and bring trust to all of these systems, not only in the financial context, but for autonomous vehicles and so on. And so we really need to get to explainable AI. And why I'm such a fan, this is the slide, is because we need standards so badly to help live in this lower swim lane of understanding why not, success, failure, etc. And this is no better evidence than the Super Bowl. If you saw this, this ad came up. It was an attack ad on the Tesla autonomous vehicle system, it was in higher end models of Tesla. You had to pay for the option, a premium price. But this video is just showing cases where it's running through stop signs of the school bus, it's driving the other side of the road, it's driving in and it's pulling these dummies, in this case, like on a ski. It's pretending like, what if the kid's crossing the street? Did the car stop? The answer is no. So there's a key issue with trust in AI and beyond just the financial space. So here's what we're doing at PwC. What I'm leading is a AI accountability framework in the trust space. And it all goes down to governance, both at the corporate and the system level. We certainly need to have algorithmic accountability down where people are writing the models in the code. And we certainly need to monitor the system over time. But the key thing I'm excited about is to have this campaign with you all and focus on data, on quality, on reliability, on standardization to develop the model, because without proper data nutrition, you can never get anything good to come out of that. And we really do need to work on this. While I was at GAO, we focused on AI policy and research implications. And here's one of the key wedges we came out with, which is developing high quality labeled data. So that's important. And right next to it is something that also I've been passionate about, is establishing regulatory sandboxes like the SEC has had one where you're testing out. You need to innovate in digital. You need the standardized data. You need the algorithms and the tools, the cloud state of the art. You need to have creative types working on this so they can develop and de-risk things along the way. And this is what the digital sandbox concept looks like. This is the one I stood up at GAO. It's like a slice of Silicon Valley, just 3 blocks from Capitol Hill. And that's going to allow us to do things like continuous auditing. I think quarterly statements is not going to be enough for a Cadence. I think auditors know if you're looking forward, it's going to be the value of auditing, for example, needs to become more real time and oversight. The markets are working at nanosecond speed, literally, nowadays. And so the idea about continuous auditing is important. We, of course, all live in the world of cryptocurrencies enabled by distributed ledger technologies or blockchains. This is another area to work and focus on digital, and we need standardized data for it as well. And I think just in my closing remarks, just the way forward is, it's just reminds me of the Sherlock Holmes quote, which says, he said, quote, data, 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 I cannot make bricks without clay, unquote. Okay. And that was a classic line I just like to say, because that was from the 19th century, talking about the importance of data being able to generate the truth that we need to build the edifice of reality, and to operate within that and to manage risk. And so standards are so important. Data are so important. And I thank you all for your time. I thank you for your work. And David, I'm happy to take any questions from you or the audience at this time.
Wonderful, Tim. Thank you very much for kind of taking us deep into the challenges of data when you talk about this thing that's been buzzing everywhere, right? ChatGPT, AI more generally. It's funny, yesterday and the day before, around lunch and dinner, it always came up at the table, sometimes in a humorous way, but also with respect to the opportunity to use these tools. I mean, ontologists and other standards professionals tend to be precise by their nature, but when you're writing standards, they have to meet very high requirements as well, right? And what are the possibilities of being able to apply ChatGPT, to be able to automate aspects of the standard writing process? Even better if you have to do it to a style book. I mean, if you can, as I've done, as I think everybody has done, to write a Shakespeare a sonnet in the Shakespearean form to about data governance, right? You can certainly say, and you don't want to, it wasn't that good, but it was interesting. But why not, if you're developing materials for standard setting, to be able to say, here's the style guide, or OMG, how to write it now in a consistent and relevant way. I mean, it's an exciting time, and you highlight these things. I think you pointed out a couple of important aspects here, right? So first, our responsibility to provide that nutrition, right? The nutrition in terms of the responsibility of having the ability to create good data, even more so that data has to be unambiguous, precise semantics, so that you can do, I mean, you even got at it, and showing the words, you need to know what the words mean, and you need to be able to come up with words that make sense in the produced text, to understand the data, whether it's free text or financial information being fed into it. So I think these are important lessons for all of us. So let me ask you a question, right? The standards professionals in this room and elsewhere are all over FDTA right now. But what is the responsibility of the analytical communities at companies, at places like PwC and other organizations, to engage directly in the development of standards, such as for FDTA, in order to make all of this work as it should?
Yeah, thanks, David. It's a great question, and I know we are. I heard at the top of the meeting, we're a voluntary system, and I've worked on other standards issues like things that we see out of our National Institute of Standards and Technology, like NIST. We're a voluntary system. I think there's a strength to that. one of the challenges, of course, is we have to go through a messy phase, I'll call it, where standards are not as appreciated, or folks are having competing standards, lowercase s, not capital S. And I wish that we would be able to converge more quickly to that. If I'm honest, I built a data analytics team. I hired GAO's first chief data scientist in its history. Um, I love the community. I come out of that. Have that thinking. But if I'm honest, at times the practitioners are not as keen on standards at times as they should. And I think there's a narrative to say, look, a little bit of housekeeping now as you're trying to innovate and do things can help drive things. I I am not a believer that standards are a suffocation function to innovation. I believe that they're a means by which innovation can occur if you have the common ground rules. And in today's environment, where you want to have ideas from many places and so on, I think you want to have an openness to diversity of thought and views on how to innovate with some data analytics oriented problem. But we should have essentially the standards of the similarity to stand upon that bedrock, so that we're not wasting time. Um, you know, if my system speaks French and yours speaks Italian, kind of as it were, right? So I think it's a critical time, and I think it's just is continuing the campaign to evangelize the importance of this, to say this, we're here to enable your success, not to shut you down. And let's just talk about how you might do that, because for you to solve some of your biggest problems, you have to do that. Otherwise, you're going to be left in a your sandbox is going to deal with toy problems, not those bigger exponential problems that all of their institutions face.
So I'm kind of reading that as a bit of a call for organizations that will be affected by this, whether they're building tools or they're hoping to use the benefits of the analytics. They want to have the right input, have the right nutrition, be able to grow and be strong. They also need to consider how to jump on in and contribute their insights, their needs into the process.
Absolutely. And I'm a believer that part of the nutrition, as an engineer, I was trained with the adage that more data is better data. Well, I don't believe that necessarily, because a lot of data could be junk, and we need to make sure that we have a quality assessment process. And I think standardization helps drive that, and which is why I'm, passionately interested on your all's success, because it's so important for the community as a whole.
So better data is better data.
Better data, that's right. And right. And you're seeing that, by the way, with the GPTs. You're seeing GPT-4 out. They're going higher and higher in terms of the number of neural network nodes on that. But they're also finding that number of nodes is not the metric. Like my 800 billion is not somehow less than the 1 trillion node, right? That's the size of the compute, by the way, and a lot of what they're doing. They're figuring out that, you have to be smarter about how the nodes are connected and things. And you can have a much more compact a language model that is computed on higher quality but less data is better than just throwing all of Wikipedia at it, if that makes sense. So it really is about quality data, and again, enter standards. That's why it's so important.
So one other question for you. In your current role, you have responsibility for bringing technology to assurance and integrity. How important is it for the technology community, those who are building the tools, to also jump involved and be involved? What is their role in making this happen? They may not be experts on the application of the data, but they're building the tools that people are using to get these great results, whether it's ChatGPT or a core financial system that's being used.
Yeah, great question. So this is where I have some background in like the DARPA community, the Advanced Research Project. So I have a projects mentality, which means you can have things that are technically interesting or cute, so to speak, but it needs to be relevant to a problem. And so I think my passion with the practitioners, the tech developers, is making sure they really understand the problem. And that at times means, without being disrespectful, tech developers need to listen to their customer, but sometimes their customer doesn't know how to articulate some of the more intricate details that matter, right? So what I just explained with like an LLM, we have a lot of folks that are talking about the importance of Gen AI, and it is important, but understanding down the mechanics actually matters so that we're talking about that, driving that data nutrition and driving that basis of understanding to be able to innovate to solve problems. So it's really not about, hey, I have a large language model, what can I do with it? It's really about, well, what are some of the core problems that the financial community is facing today that if you had some, magical technology or set of data or both or whatever, what would you do? And I think it's incumbent upon the tech developers, the techies, to again have a keen ability to listen to and then ascertain the actual problem, not overpromise and underdeliver on the solution, right? And to drive and to recognize again the importance of why it's better, if, especially in a world of lots of data, you want to have high quality data, you want to have more of that commonly understood kind of data, like the XBRL kind of thing. So that's what I would say.
So if there are no other questions, Tim, thank you very much for your insights, for taking us into some of the adjacent areas of data standards, right? The technologies that we need to feed as much as anything else. Thank you for your service when you were a Fed, and good luck in your new role at PwC.
Happy to.
We look forward to having you back in the future.
Thanks very
Thank
much,
you.
David. Good morning, everyone.